Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror and detail. On this channel, we delve into the spine-chilling world of werewolf horror stories that will send shivers down your spine. First story, The Shadow of the Wolf. Before I begin, I'll give you some pretense. My name is Axel, and I am a 23-year-old man living partially reliant on my parents. Together, we live in upstate Alaska, not so far off the edge of Anchorage, a small, tucked-away town nestled in the woods. Anything and everything that we can't get from our neighbors or the surrounding woods requires at least 40 minutes of driving. That's for a one-way trip, mind you. By partially reliant, I mean that I live in their house, but I contribute my own rent, food, and utility money. It is not a lot, considering the basic home we have, but it made me feel like more of a man, and the low cost eased the pressure off my wallet, allowing me to buy things for my own enjoyment. I pride myself in being logical and mentally sound. Ghost stories do not scare me, though they serve to give me mighty entertaining evenings. And any fears of wild things out in the woods, which were not unjustified due to predators in the area, were quickly dissuaded when I purchased a hunting shotgun for my 20th birthday. Like it or not, I have yet to meet a creature alive that resists 12-gauge completely. I believe the old adage is, if it bleeds, you can kill it, though there are many variations. It is important to note that I keep the gun in my back seat, loaded, but chamber empty, so that any jolts don't set off the trigger and give my passenger door a case of lead poisoning. So, understanding all of this, I hope you can come to realize why the fear I felt was so foreign, so intense, that I became afraid of the fear itself. It began one evening, a normal day with clear skies that had been woefully uneventful, a fact doubled by my boss letting me know that he had enough hands on deck for the weekend. There was a lack of snow on the ground, a rare occasion in winter, but the grass outside had frost on it that sparkled in the dying light of the sun. My mother had asked me to drive to the store and pick up a few groceries. Meat was already taken care of, so it was just a few simple herbs. Any annoyance at taking such a long drive for likely no more than $10 of ingredients was far overshadowed by the satisfaction of having something to do. Grabbing my keys, I quickly ran across the driveway, trying not to breathe the far below frozen air too deeply. The rusted old truck I drove had a terrible heater, and I probably wouldn't get much warmer until I made it to the store. With my breath fogging against the windshield, I made my way into the back roads. On either side of me, extinguishing any light the near-dead sun would have allotted me, were thick masses of pine trees. The first half of my journey was uneventful, as was the shopping itself, save for one detail. Animal crossing signs were always prevalent on these roads, moose being the main threat. So when I saw a new sign, one with fresh paint and an odd red reflective coat, I couldn't help but read it. Warning: timber wolf pack sighting. Aside from the silhouette of a large wolf on the sign, no other indicators were given. I can admit now that the choice of wording was a bit strange. Typically they simply say something like animal crossing and a silhouette of whatever animal was in question. Any confusion or questioning I had faded just as fast as the sign flew by my side. In fact, the sign was entirely forgotten about by the time I had rung up the ingredients requested of me. Once again, crossing the lot to my truck exposed me to the freezing air. But this time my truck's age paid for itself with the amazing insulative properties of a solid steel body, and the cabin was actually comfortable when I got back. With the radio shifting between static and old country blues, I began the second half of my drive back, noting the time had already crawled to 9 p.m. Once the tiny collection of streetlight had disappeared in my rearview mirrors, I was left with absolutely no light besides my dim yellow headlights. Bored as I was, the drive served to be relaxing, giving me plenty of time to think, an overly common pastime of mine. I was perhaps halfway through crafting the subplot of my very own movie when the same red sign flashed out against my headlights, nearly unnatural in its glaring brightness. The briefest of chills brushed my neck and I cussed, making sure all windows were soundly rolled up. When I finished my check, having seen no gap between glass and door, the sign was long behind me. Though the chill had left me, I dropped a gear to raise the RPM of the engine, hoping the additional motion would translate into more heat for me. Not even a minute after I heard my radio cut out. It didn't go silent, but the shift from music to static was hard and sudden. Behind the static, in place of where music should have been, was the faintest high-pitched ringing, like microphone feedback resonating with itself. It was piercing, yet overpowered by the static that now seemed just slightly louder than any music I had been listening to so far. I went to crank down the volume, already beginning to feel an earache coming along. I twisted once, twice, and on the third turn the knob fell right off, bumping my leg and landing somewhere in the passenger floorboard. I cussed again. Even if the radio was at a more acceptable volume, I still had to find that part before it disappeared into the same unknown space every mechanic's 10mm goes to. In a rather stupid decision, I centered my truck between the two-lane asphalt, giving myself enough room on either side to not roll into a ditch while I was rooting around next to me. My eyes were off the road for perhaps 3 seconds total, my fingers almost immediately finding the radio knob and chucking it into my door handle. But when I looked up, there was a figure in the road. It didn't dart out like some swift shadow, but simply sat there as I approached. I was lucky for my earlier drop in gear, as it reduced my speed and gave me time to hit the brakes. The truck skidded to a halt, tires screeching while my eyes flung dangerously close to the steering wheel before the seatbelt caught me. I lurched as it stopped and was rocked back into my seat and into the perfect position to stare at the figure in the road. I had half expected the damn thing to dart away as it realized the glowing 2-ton mass of metal was heading towards it. Instead, my gaze met the eyes of a wolf, barely a dozen feet from the front of my truck. It, like myself, was situated perfectly in the center of the road. My headlights cast against its body, painting the animal's shadow against the aged pavement beyond it. Even as I caught my breath, the wolf did not move. Its pitch-black coat betrayed the earlier sign of timber wolves, but damn if this thing wasn't huge. I swear its head was damn near in line with my own, or at least up to the hood, enough that, even crouched over as wolves are, its posture still allowed its own eyes to lock with mine. God, those eyes. That's where it started. Though unnerving in size, I was certain that anything this wolf could try would at worst leave some dents and scratches into my truck, which was already a relic. But those eyes, they burned a deep crimson, as if an artist had perfectly captured the embers at the center of a campfire, but had run out of orange and yellow to paint them, settling on the bloodiest of reds. I was frozen then, though I didn't realize it for a few more moments. I could only stare it back, the ungodly shade of red seeming to burn itself into my mind. I didn't even realize I had stopped breathing. Then it began to change. No, I'm getting it mixed up. The wolf itself did not change, but the air did. The radio static, having before been reduced to nothing but a dull roar in my ears, was ever so slowly ramping up in intensity. The ringing was back, now beginning to overtake the static in its volume. My ears stung, my eyes burned. I was cold. Everything continued getting worse from there. I began shivering subconsciously as I gazed at the wolf, seeing its massive form casting shadows behind it. Was it closer now? I couldn't tell. From my peripheral vision, my eyes still locked with its own, I could see movement behind it. The shadows were moving, rolling, bubbling, shifting. They grew and shrank, stretched and contracted. God, it felt like the shadows were screaming at me. It felt like the wolf's eyes were glowing brighter. God, it was closer. Not by much, maybe only a few feet, but it had moved. How did it move? I was staring right at it, unblinking even, and yet I never saw a thing. I felt cold, beyond cold. Like the chill seeping into my veins was slowly coagulating my blood, thickening it until it felt like my heart was pumping slush through my veins. I wasn't breathing. The fear started then. First it was confusion, then apprehension, and now I was afraid. The moment I realized the fear, it seemed to multiply hundreds of times. I couldn't scream, couldn't move, but I had to, primal fear taking over me. I needed to put miles, no, worlds between me and this thing. My body shook violently, damn near seizing. Whether it was from the cold or my efforts to move, I cannot say. It was closer again, 6 feet at most. Those shadows still rolled, ripping apart and converging like mutating meat. The feeling was beyond fear now. It wasn't simply me being afraid of being mauled to death by this wolf. No, in that moment mauling would have been a better alternative. It was as if I was afraid this creature would somehow destroy the very idea of me, rending my soul into tatters and tearing into my spirit like fresh bloody meat. Escape was no longer on my mind, at least not physical escape. As the wolf approached, somehow moving despite my eyes telling me otherwise, it placed a paw onto the hood of my truck. I began straining for a different kind of movement. I tried to reach in the back, towards the shotgun I kept in the seat. No, dear reader, I was not reaching back with the intention of placing buckshot into this creature's head. I was reaching backwards with the intention of killing myself, blowing my brains out at whatever cost, in the hope that the swift death it brought me might save my essence from being torn apart by this otherworldly predator. But I could not move. I was trapped in my own shaking, ice-cold body. My chest burned with both a lack of oxygen and the feeling of my heart struggling to move my blood, now feeling like molasses within my veins. My ears stung with the sound of the radio's incessant ringing, and now I swore I could hear screams from it as well. Human, animal, and anything else you can image, all crying in terror and fear. The wolf was perched entirely on my hood now, glaring down at me through the windshield as the entire truck had lurched forwards under its weight. Its gaze burned. The expression of the wolf was not what one would expect from a predator about to catch a meal. It seemed as if it was only observing me, waiting for me to die. Soon I would, as I was now certain my heart had given up its futile effort to move my frozen blood. Then, barely audible over the radio, there was another sound. A deep, splintering crack, far unlike anything simply stepping on a branch. It was the sound of an entire tree's trunk being swiftly rent apart. The wolf's head snapped to the side, freeing me of its gaze. My veins ached as blood began to move again, feeling like ice crystals were being pushed through them. I raked in a breath of air, one that was not ice cold, but rather the stale warm air of my truck's cabin. Along with the wolf, I instinctually turned to the source of the sound. It was a moose, but different. Its pelt was stark white against the black trees, its eyes glowing an incandescent blue, everything about it nearly mirroring the abomination perched on my hood, except its size. The sheer size of the beast caught me off guard. The wolf was still within the realm of possibility, though surely would have been the apex predator of whatever area it called home. But this moose was beyond massive, at least 12 feet at the shoulder with a rack wider than my own truck. Looking at it, I found the source of the cracking sound that had shook me loose of the wolf's impossible grasp. A pine tree, fully grown and plenty stout, had been shoved over by this thing's antlers. Now, its view unobstructed, it only stared at the wolf. And the wolf, for the first time since I had seen it, began to growl. The pitch-black fur on its back raised up as the wolf crouched, digging its claws into the hood of my truck. The growl was deep and rumbling, shaking the frame of the truck so much that I could hear loose objects rattling around. The moose responded, letting out the signature keening scream of a reindeer, but much lower. This sound shook my bones. The massive moose drug its hoof across the ground, creating a divot wide enough to make a sound grave, and snorted as it lowered its own head. The wolf, clearly far beyond anything I could hope to kill, began to back away. Like mercury, it seemed to almost flow off the hood of my vehicle, crouching onto the ground and retreating backwards into the woods, never breaking the gaze between the two creatures. When it was out of sight, and my blood had significantly thawed, the moose shifted its gaze to me. I felt no fear from it, but I did not feel like it was an ally either. Snorting again, it jerked its head down the road, as if telling me to leave, telling me that I wasn't welcome. I needed no further incentive to floor the gas, rocketing up to 80 miles per hour on thin back roads all the way back to my home. A 30-minute trip turned into just over 10 minutes, but it was long enough for my labored breathing to slow and for warmth to finally creep back into my bones. Upon my return, in which I sprinted from the driveway to the door, my parents must have known something was up. Deep inside I knew that they would never believe me if I told them everything. So I told them what I could. I nearly hit an animal on the road, a wolf, and in swerving I nearly fell into a deep ditch. Though they looked at me strangely, I told them the same thing I'll tell you. If you are alone on the roads at night and you see a wolf, don't stop or swerve. Simply look down and press the gas. Second story. There's something wrong with the moon. There's something wrong with the moon. I first noticed it as I was driving home from work. Through the crisscrossing branches of the treetops, I saw a flash of white, and my brain immediately thought it was some sort of early Christmas decoration, like a lit star on top of a building. Of course, a second later, I realized it was the moon, but I could see why my brain went there. It looked just a little bigger, a little brighter than it should have been, a big white ball shining down on me like an eye. Throughout the drive home, as soon as the moon peeked into view, my eyes immediately snapped to it. It was jarring, different. As products of evolution, our brains are programmed to notice changes in our surroundings. New things, different things. It's why we notice a speck of dirt on the floor, instead of the dozens of whorls in the wood or the way the carpet fibers push together. Our eyes go to it because it's different. And my eyes kept going to the moon. When I got home, I told my husband, "The moon looks weird." He joined me at the window. We stared up at it together. It was perfectly full, a perfect circle floating in the endless expanse of space. Wait, wasn't it just a crescent moon a few days ago? Rich asked me. Maybe. I pulled out my phone. I searched for a few minutes, and then I found it. A moon calendar. My heart dropped. It's supposed to be a new moon right now. Rich took the phone from me and stared at it. What? We both looked at the calendar. Then I searched for more moon calendars. But they all said the same thing. Tonight was supposed to be a new moon. I started through the house, closing the blinds. Rich followed me. What are you doing? I don't want to see it anymore. I snapped. He stepped back, surprised at my sudden anger. I didn't blame him. I, too, was surprised by how panicked my voice sounded. What if it's some kind of spy weather balloon, or UFO or something. That's designed to look like the moon, so no one questions it. Then they did a shitty job. They should have looked at the moon calendar before designing it, or sent it up when it was a full moon. Or maybe there are other factors at play. Maybe they can only send it up during certain weather conditions. So they had to send it up tonight. I continued closing the curtains. Through the translucent, gauzy ones in the living room, I could still see it. A foggy, glowing sphere above the treetops. A chill ran down my spine. I started upstairs, but when I walked over to the window, ready to close the curtains, I froze. Thick clouds had rolled in, but they weren't in front of the moon. They were behind it. "Rich!" I shouted. "Rich, look!" I pointed at the sky, shaking. He stared up at it, confused. Then his face dropped with realization. He reached up and pulled the curtains closed with a metallic schooling. We went back downstairs and turned on the local news. But there was nothing about it. Nothing about the fake moon floating in the sky. "It can't be that high up," I whispered. "If it's in front of the clouds. It's probably one of those spy balloons, like you said." I texted a few of our friends in town. Only one texted back. He'd noticed the moon looked bright, but hadn't thought through it more than that. Now he was freaking out just like we were, as he noticed the clouds behind the moon, just like we did. As Rich and I sat together, talking about what this could possibly be, something caught my eye. Movement through the translucent curtains in the living room. I ran to the window, parted them slightly. I gasped as I watched the moon ripple. That was the only way I could describe it. Like the image was some huge piece of cloth, balloon or otherwise, hit with a gust of wind. The craters rippled and shivered, and then the moon went out. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I could barely make out a black, circular silhouette floating up in the sky where the moon had been. It floated upwards and disappeared. This was about a week ago. Since nothing else happened, and the balloon or whatever it was didn't reappear, I thought that was the end of it. Whatever it was, it had completed its journey and moved on to other things. But I was wrong. Because this morning, I received a text message from an unverified number. It was a photo, an aerial view of our house, taken from maybe 1,000 feet up. Detailed enough that I could make out the half-built garden in our backyard, the chairs on our deck. After talking to our friends, we learned they'd received similar images of their own houses in startling detail, but we all got the same message. 2 words below the image. "We're watching." Third story. Every full moon, the paintings in our gallery scream. In the heart of a quaint, unnamed town, shrouded in the embrace of ancient oaks, stood the Gallows Art Gallery, a place where the whispers of the past seemed to echo through its hallowed halls. I had just accepted the position of curator, a role I embraced with a blend of pride and excitement. The gallery, with its Gothic architecture and a reputation for housing some of the most intriguing and unsettling pieces of art, had always been a place of fascination for me. As I walked through its corridors on my first day, the paintings seemed to watch me, their eyes following my every step. There was an otherworldly beauty to them, a strange blend of awe and unease that they instilled in me. The gallery staff, a small team of dedicated individuals, shared stories of the gallery's history as we walked. They spoke of its founding, the mysterious benefactors, and the peculiar artists whose works adorned the walls. However, amidst their tales, there lingered an unspoken tension, a secret I was yet to uncover. The town, too, seemed to hold the gallery in a mix of reverence and fear. The local shops and cafes were adorned with artwork inspired by the gallery's collection, yet the townsfolk spoke little of it, their words always measured, their glances quick and guarded. My curiosity piqued as I settled into my new role, eager to unravel the mysteries of the Gallows Art Gallery. Little did I know, the coming full moon would reveal secrets more horrifying than anything I could have imagined. As night fell on my first full moon in the town, the gallery transformed. The moon's silver light seeped through the stained glass windows, casting eerie shadows across the gallery floors. Then, as the clock struck midnight, a chilling phenomenon unfolded. The paintings, those silent sentinels of history and horror, began to scream. The sound was gut-wrenching, a chorus of anguish that filled the night. It emanated from every portrait, every landscape, every abstract form. A symphony of terror that held us in its grip. The staff and I stood frozen, our hearts racing, as we witnessed the walls of the Gallows Art Gallery come to a terrifying life. As the first light of dawn broke, the screams faded, leaving behind a haunting silence and a gallery of secrets waiting to be unraveled. The mystery of the screaming paintings had just begun, and I was at the center of it, both terrified and captivated by the unknown forces I was about to confront. The morning after the full moon, the gallery was eerily quiet, as if the building itself was holding its breath. The staff, pale and wide-eyed, whispered among themselves, casting nervous glances at the paintings. The event of the previous night hung heavily over us, an unspoken terror that we were all reluctant to address. Yet, there was a burning need for answers that gnawed at my curiosity. Determined to unravel the mystery, I began delving into the gallery's archives. Dusty tomes and ancient documents told tales of the gallery's past, but nothing that could explain the supernatural occurrence. Frustrated, I decided to seek knowledge outside the confines of the gallery. In a quaint corner of the town, I found an old historian, a man whose life had been dedicated to the study of the town's enigmatic past. His home was an eclectic mix of books, artifacts, and parchments, each telling a story of a different era. Hesitantly, I recounted the events of the full moon night to him. The historian listened intently, his eyes narrowing with recognition as I spoke. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, a grave look on his face. He spoke of a legend, long whispered in hushed tones by the townsfolk. It was said that the souls of the subjects portrayed in the gallery's paintings were trapped within the canvases, cursed to relive their tormented existences. I struggled to believe the tale. It was the stuff of ghost stories and folklore, not the reality I had known. But the historian's words resonated with a chilling truth, especially after what I had witnessed. Returning to the gallery, I shared my findings with the staff. The legend seemed to fit the puzzle, yet it was a piece we all wished was mere fiction. As the next full moon approached, a sense of dread settled over us. We needed more evidence, something tangible to prove or disprove the haunting legend of the Gallows Art Gallery. That's when I decided to set up cameras throughout the gallery. If the paintings were to scream again, I wanted to capture every moment, every detail. Perhaps, in those recordings, lay the answers we desperately sought. The stage was set, and as the night of the next full moon drew near, a silent prayer lingered on my lips, a prayer for understanding, for courage, and for the strength to face whatever horrors awaited us in the screaming gallery. The night of the next full moon came with a tension that clung to the air like a thick fog. The gallery, under the watchful eye of the moon, seemed to bristle with an unseen energy. The staff, though apprehensive, stayed to witness what might occur, their curiosity overcoming their fear. As the curator, I felt a responsibility not only to uncover the truth, but also to protect them. As midnight approached, we waited in silence, our eyes fixed on the paintings. The cameras, strategically placed, recorded every corner of the gallery. Then, as the clock chimed the arrival of midnight, the screams began anew. It was a sound that could chill the very soul, a cry of despair and anger that emanated from the ancient canvases. We watched in horror as the paintings transformed before our eyes. The figures within writhed and twisted, their painted expressions contorting into grotesque masks of agony. The screams were not just sounds but physical manifestations of the torment trapped within the frames. The night passed in a blur of terror and disbelief. When dawn finally broke, we were left exhausted and shaken. The gallery once again silent, but forever changed in our eyes. I reviewed the footage with a heavy heart, the evidence undeniable. The paintings were more than mere art. They were prisons for something unexplainable, something profoundly disturbing. The legend the historian had spoken of was real, and we had witnessed its truth. As the days passed, the phenomenon began to occur more frequently. It was no longer bound to the full moon. The screams would start unexpectedly, shattering the gallery's calm at any given moment. The once revered art pieces had become objects of fear, their beauty marred by the horrors they harbored. Visitors to the gallery dwindled, rumors of the haunted paintings spreading like wildfire through the town. The staff, once proud to be part of the Gallows Art Gallery, now worked with a sense of dread, each of us jumping at the slightest creak of the old floorboards. I realized that we were dealing with something beyond our understanding, a curse that was escalating with each passing day. The need for action became urgent, but the path forward was clouded with uncertainty. How does one combat a curse that is centuries old, a terror that is as much a part of the gallery as the paintings themselves? As the next supermoon approached, a sense of impending doom settled over us. We were about to face the climax of this nightmare, and I feared what horrors it might bring. The gallery, once a place of beauty and history, had become a stage for a terrifying spectacle we were powerless to stop. The night of the supermoon was upon us, and with it, the unknown terrors of the screaming gallery. The night of the supermoon arrived, casting an eerie, luminescent glow over the gallery. The staff and I gathered, a sense of solemnity among us. We had decided to face whatever came together, bound by a shared determination to end the nightmare that had enveloped our lives. As the moon reached its zenith, the gallery seemed to pulse with a malevolent life. The air grew thick, charged with a palpable sense of dread. Then, with a suddenness that took our breath away, the screaming started. It was louder, more agonizing than ever before, echoing through the halls like the cries of tortured souls. But this night was different. The paintings began to change, the figures within them contorting in ways that defied reality. Then, to our utter disbelief, they began to emerge from their frames. Like specters, they stepped into our world, their forms ghastly and distorted, yet terrifyingly real. The gallery descended into chaos. We scattered, seeking refuge from the nightmarish apparitions that pursued us. The figures, bound by some unseen force, wreaked havoc, their screams now mingled with our own. In the midst of this pandemonium, I realized that these entities were bound to the paintings, their existence tied to the cursed canvases. A desperate plan formed in my mind to destroy the paintings and, hopefully, the entities with them. Gathering my courage, I made my way to the storage room, where we kept the inflammable solvents and materials used for restoration. The gallery was a maze of terror, each corridor filled with the screams and ghastly figures of the paintings come to life. Finally reaching the storage, I grabbed what I needed and began the harrowing task of dousing the paintings in solvent. Each step was a battle against fear and the surreal entities that sought to stop me. The climax of the night came as I set the first painting ablaze. The flames consumed the canvas, and the figure within let out a final, ear-piercing scream before vanishing. Emboldened, I moved from painting to painting, setting each one on fire. The gallery became a pyre, the flames a beacon of our desperate struggle. The staff, seeing my actions, joined in, helping to destroy the remaining paintings. The entities, their forms flickering and fading, fought back, but their power waned as the paintings burned. As the last painting turned to ashes, a deafening silence fell over the gallery. The entities were gone, the curse lifted. We stood among the ruins of the gallery, the moon's light filtering through the smoke-filled air. The night of terror had ended, but at a cost we were only beginning to comprehend. The supermoon's light waned, and with it, the nightmare of the Gallows Art Gallery drew to a close. The screaming had ceased, but the echoes of that night would haunt us forever. We had faced the unknown and emerged victorious, but the scars of that night would remain, a reminder of the horrors that lurk in the shadows of history and art. In the aftermath of the inferno, the dawn greeted us with a somber light. The once grand Gallows Art Gallery lay in ruins, its walls blackened and its treasures reduced to cinders. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and the remnants of lost history. We, the survivors of the night, stood amidst the ashes, each lost in our own thoughts of the ordeal we had endured. The town, roused by the sight of the burning gallery, gathered in silent disbelief. Their once proud landmark was now a charred shell, a testament to the unknown terror that had lurked within. The staff and I were questioned by the authorities. Our accounts met with skepticism and disbelief. How could we explain the unexplainable? The truth was too bizarre, too frightening to be comprehended by those who had not witnessed it. In the days that followed, the gallery became the subject of rumors and wild speculation. Some spoke of a curse, others of a mass hallucination. The truth, however, remained known only to those who had lived through it. I spent my days wandering the remnants of the gallery, the memories of that night haunting my every step. The decision to burn the paintings weighed heavily on me. Though it had been necessary, the loss of such historic art was a tragedy. But what choice had we had? The gallery had harbored a darkness that threatened not just us, but potentially the world beyond its walls. The local historian, the man who had first told me of the legend, visited me among the ruins. He spoke of cycles, of history repeating itself, and of the possibility that the curse might not be fully extinguished. His words were a cold comfort, a reminder that some mysteries were better left unsolved. In a final act of closure, I decided to leave the town. The gallery had been my dream, but that dream had turned into a nightmare. The staff, too, dispersed, each seeking to put the distance between themselves and the memories of the gallery. The Gallows Art Gallery was eventually demolished, the land left barren, a hollow scar in the heart of the town. Rumors persisted, stories of strange sightings, and eerie sounds where the gallery once stood. But no one dared to investigate. The legend of the screaming paintings became just another ghost story, whispered in the dark corners of the town. The final scene of my story takes place years later, in a different town, in a new art gallery. A set of paintings, eerily reminiscent of those from the Gallows Art Gallery, hangs on the walls. Unbeknownst to the visitors who admire them, a familiar cycle waits to begin anew. The truth of the screaming paintings lives on, a haunting melody that refuses to be silenced. The curse, it seems, was not fully vanquished, merely dormant, waiting for the next unsuspecting curator to unveil its horrors once again. Years passed since the night the Gallows Art Gallery was consumed by fire, and with it, the cursed paintings that screamed under the full moon. The town slowly healed, its residents whispering less and less about the bizarre events, allowing them to fade into the realm of urban legends and eerie folklore. I moved to a different city, trying to rebuild my life away from the shadows of the past. Yet the memories lingered like ghostly echoes in my mind. The gallery and its horrors became a distant, though ever-present, part of my history. I avoided art exhibitions and galleries, the mere sight of a painting enough to stir the embers of that frightful memory. But fate, it seemed, had a cruel sense of irony. One ordinary afternoon, while strolling through a new city, I found myself drawn to a recently opened art gallery. Something inexplicable compelled me to step inside. The gallery was modern, its walls adorned with a variety of paintings. As I walked through the exhibits, a chilling sense of déjà vu crept over me. There, in a quiet corner of the gallery, hung a series of paintings that made my heart stop. They were different, yet hauntingly similar to those of the Gallows Art Gallery. The figures in these paintings had the same eerie quality, their eyes seeming to follow me, whispering silent pleas from their canvas prisons. A cold dread settled in my heart. Had the curse truly been broken, or had it merely spread, like a dark contagion, waiting to unleash its terror anew? The gallery owner, noticing my interest, approached and began to speak enthusiastically about the recent acquisition of these magnificent and mysterious pieces. I listened, my mind racing with questions. Where had these paintings come from? Were they connected to the ones that had once screamed under the light of the full moon? Or was this just a coincidence, a trick played by a mind scarred by trauma? The owner mentioned how these paintings were becoming the main attraction, drawing curious visitors, especially on full moon nights. A chill ran down my spine. The cycle was repeating, the curse undying. I left the gallery abruptly, my mind a tumult of fear and urgency. The resolution of my tale is an open one, a whispered warning of a horror that refuses to die. The screaming paintings of the Gallows Art Gallery were gone, but their legacy lived on, a lurking threat hidden in plain sight. I often wonder about those new paintings, about the gallery that now houses them. Are they silent on full moon nights, or do they echo the screams of their predecessors? The answer is a secret I dare not uncover. For some horrors are best left undisturbed, their stories unfinished, lingering in the shadows of the unknown. And so, my story ends, not with a conclusion, but with a cautionary tale. The screaming paintings, whether a curse or a legend, are a reminder of the mysteries that lie beyond the veil of the ordinary, waiting, ever patient, for the next unsuspecting soul to unveil their hidden terrors. Fourth story, Full Moon, Demonic Chain of Events? I had a really weird full moon experience recently, dealing with a strange and evil aura. A possessed King Corso and a paranormal spider? I didn't even realize it being full moon, by the way, until I Googled it after the fact just for laughs. And as it turned out to be so, I got more certain something paranormal went down. Listen, I know nothing about this stuff, but I think full moon has to be significant when it comes to paranormal things. Right? Strap in, boys. This is sort of long. I'm not afraid of things. Even things I know I should be afraid of logically. Nothing makes my heart race. I got desensitized to scary things and emotions in general as a kid. I'm not mentally ill, though. Traumatized at most. I don't rule paranormal stuff out, but I do think most paranormal stories are presented 99% of the time in an emotionally manipulative, hysterical, and dramatized way, which makes me not care. So, on the night of the last full moon of this winter, strange things happened. I was on a walk with my dog at night. We always go out pretty late. This was nothing unusual. The moon was super bright. It almost felt like daytime, and there was a strange, sinister energy surrounding me. Didn't hate it, TBH. I find all feelings amusing, since I usually am pretty flatlined. Important note. I was listening to an interview of a Catholic priest recounting stories of meeting the devil. It was nothing scary, though, and was rather undramatic. However, it's important to note, because it could have altered my psyche. Anyway, as we walked onto an alley we always walk through, I physically jumped out of fear. A lanky hooded man stormed past us. I tried to see his face, but it was in the shadows. For some reason, I was afraid of him. My heart raced, and I felt frozen in place. So, this sounds like nothing for a regularly functioning human, I am aware. Being on a dark alley and a stranger, who you can't make eye contact with, approaches could make one jumpy, for a good reason. Except it was me. That doesn't happen to me. I don't have the jump scare reflex, and I enjoy the unpredictability of stranger danger. This time, though, I felt an urge to turn back to my apartment, that something bad was going to happen. I didn't turn back, obviously, as I am a Gordon chose to cry type of a person in general. Though, I admit that moment left me shaky and paranoid for at least 5 minutes after. It wasn't the person, but the energy I felt was suffocating. The second strange thing happened right after I had grounded myself and brushed off the earlier moment as, dumb. Me and my dog turned a corner and lady was withdrawing money from an ATM. She was pretty far away, and she had a beautiful large cane corso with her. We have seen this dog before on our walks and is always well behaved and at most disinterested in us. My dog is a big, sensitive dog who I have never even heard growl. He is not a fighter in any sense of the word. Think Doug from Up, but less hyper. This is a cause of annoyance to me, since he can't protect himself, and I really am not the kind to want to baby their dog. Coincidentally, a cane corso is my dream dog, and I have often considered trading my dog up for one. I haven't though, since I don't think it would be a healthy thing to do. As soon as the cane corso laid eyes on us, he bolted towards us and the lady went flying on her back. The force from her dog was so big that I honestly think she might have broken her tailbone at the very least. Her handbag, money and cards scattered around. After the corso got to a distance of about 3 meters from us, he stopped running and started to prowl slowly. His eyes were large and intense, hair standing on the back of his neck, tail stiff. You would know this behavior if you have a guard dog. Minus the prowling, that was strange. I thought this was strange also, since this has never happened before, with this particular dog or any other. My dog is never in fights. Ever. Dogs can smell him being a beta from miles away. And I live in an area with an abundance of untrained, powerful guard dogs. Not once has any of them perceived us as remotely interesting. Oh. And by the way, you'd think this moment would have scared me more than the random hooded guy vibes. But nope. Back to my old self again. Well, I guess it's also due to especially not being afraid of dogs. A free cheat code for anyone who has a dog. If Rover gets loose, rather than you also losing your mind in the process, do not start screaming bloody murder. Knock yourself unconscious instead. How about that? Literally more useful. If your dog, that isn't escaping due to being afraid of you, gets loose, they will return sooner than you think, even if you do nothing. They just will. Trust me. Dogs are like that. Do not run and scream like a him. I digress. This tip is in regard to the next part. After frantically gathering her belongings from the ground, the owner had a complete meltdown and started screaming for her dog. She was in full-on panic mode, running back and forth and screaming. She sounded like she had just let loose a hungry lion, and now it was going to eat an innocent bystander. I know dogs, okay? This dog was not intending to needlessly hurt us, but the owner being so afraid made me question my perception. Had this dog eaten someone before? I don't know. I'm not a dog whisperer. To our luck, the owner stayed at a distance, since her coming closer would have escalated things for sure. The dog did not flinch an ear towards the owner. As he got to us, he circled us very slowly a couple of times, measuring us up, and finally stopped to face my dog. They were inches away from each other, staring, eye to eye, long enough for me to get bored. I was doing some vet bill math in my head, tbh. Tense long stares like this usually don't end well. To my surprise, instead of hiding behind me or acting like a nervous puppy like he usually does, my dog stood his ground firmly next to me the whole time. Didn't look away. Then he did the unthinkable and barked right at this dog's face. And just like that, the dog turned around and ran back to his owner. The moment was super strange and tense. Not because of what happened, pretty mundane in a different context, but when it happened, after the previous scare, Catholic Devil podcast, Full Moon. And by whom it happened, not just any dog, but my dream breed of dog, a symbol of my greatest desire. Also, black dogs are associated with the occult and paranormality, right? Also, this Cane Corso, who is usually so chill, had an aura of, like he wasn't there, but someone else was. I wasn't afraid of him. Not at all. So it has nothing to do with fear, but he didn't feel like a dog. It was someone else. Dare I say, demonic? And I think my dog saw it too, and that's the reason he wasn't afraid, because it wasn't a dog. And this right here is the problem of paranormal stories. They're based on vibes and energies that you can't understand unless you feel them. Super annoying. If we're being honest, I think in my heart of hearts that someone was inside this dog. Human-like, but obviously not human. A demon? Maybe. Full moon energies? Who knows? Oh, and the dog was called Rocco, which is the name of a Catholic saint of dogs. It's a fairly common name for a dog, but I thought that was a funny coincidence too, as I was listening to a Catholic priest during this encounter. Maybe Saint Rocco was inside of Rocco. Haha. The third strange thing is the most annoying to explain, because I will sound insane. I promise you I am not. This happened on the same night, after getting back from the walk. I had a really loud tinnitus ringing in my ear, and I felt annoyed, since I was getting ready for bed. I do get tinnitus from time to time, but it's never that loud. I could barely hear my own thoughts. I laid in my bed scrolling on my phone. There is a wooden stool next to my bed, and I had a copy of The Count of Monte Cristo on it. Suddenly, I saw a big spider crawling on it, the size and form of a black widow, but white/bone in color. Immediately as I saw it, I slammed my hand on the book to crush it, like a strange impulse/something I couldn't control. But as I looked down, the spider wasn't there. It wasn't anywhere. I seriously looked everywhere. I saw it though, as clear as I saw the book. Listen, my initial reaction to spiders is never to kill them. They're fascinating pieces of art. Yes, if I saw anything as beautiful as this spider was. But this time I tried to kill it immediately, like I wasn't in control of my own body. And oh, by the way, in the 5 years I have lived in my apartment, have I ever seen a spider? Ever. Even in the summer, so. Yeah, that was a hallucination, obviously. Or, a ghost of a spider coming to say boo. Anyway, the next day I was a little wary of my surroundings and my mental state, trying to evaluate for a possible psychotic break. But no, Everything was back to normal. No tinnitus, no ominous energies, nothing. I did have a dream of drinking blood that was unpure, whatever that means, with a demon though, which is unusual obviously, but honestly I think that was just due to me thinking about the devil, but who knows? Maybe I signed a deal with the devil in my dreams. R.I.P. me. Conclusion. Was this all a coincidence? I honestly don't think so, but you be the judge. We'll be interested to hear if anyone has any experience with possessed animals though. Also, have you noticed the moon cycles having any part in these things? Fifth story. There is a werewolf wandering around the outskirts of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It has taken me a while to collect my thoughts and be able to recall all of this. By now, at least 8 weeks have passed since I last sat down to write in this journal. I only kept keeping this because my therapist, a cute 30-something redhead, insisted I do so. My memory has been slipping away piece by piece. Parts of weeks are gone. Plans I've made suddenly lose their spot at the forefront of my mind. I started considering trying to do dream recollection and other methods to try and help sharpen my memory, but I can't even remember if I dream anymore or not. Had it been summer already? Where had the days gone? I was still experiencing PTSD from the following event that I accounted for in my journal. Here is what I wrote. It was the very end of spring. I remember it like it was yesterday. I moved to Pittsburgh from San Antonio nearly 6 months prior. Adjusting to the move and my new job as a chemist at the nuclear power facility out in Beaver County, I was still adjusting to things like the time change, the temperatures, although it had been an awfully pleasant spring thus far. That was all about to change, apparently. It was an average day in April. I'm not exactly sure of the date. It had been a Friday. I walked out of the security gates, collected my personal belongings that weren't allowed past security, and said my goodbyes to my coworkers. The sun was not even setting yet, a nice change from the cold, dark winters of the region. However, even today as I strode along the exposed parking lot, something felt off. It felt like 2 beady, yellow eyes were watching me. It was strange for me to suffer from paranoia, but I guess after bouts of insomnia due to a move, I had been more worse for wear than usual. As a chemist, my job really wasn't taxing or nerve-wracking. The added bonus of working on nuclear power was more of an excitement than deterrent to me, as these facilities were incredibly safe by now. To top it off, Pittsburgh was in a well-shielded region safe from the Midwest plains wrought with tornadoes. As well, the nearest fault line was the New Madrid, and it had been relatively inactive in recent times. So outside of human error, I really did not have much to worry about, and let's face it, humans didn't really even run these plants anymore. They were entirely digital. I unlocked my Ford F-150. I had recently picked it up to contend with the rugged terrain I'd constantly face while hiking in the summer months. As I unlocked it and prepared to open the handle, I thought I heard footsteps somewhere a few cars behind me shuffling quickly. This, on top of the feeling I was being watched, made me finally turn around to confront whoever was trying to prank me. "All right," I half shouted. "I hear you back there. Who is that? Frank? Monte? Oliver?" Frank was a systems specialist. He was your typical blue-collared, football and beer-loving 54-year-old. Monty was a Frenchman here to do work as an exchange program with Électricité de France. Oliver was a quiet, 20-something software engineer, and despite his shy, introverted nature, once you got to know him, you uncovered a remarkable sense of humor and dry sarcasm. A very bright kid. I had been in my field for over 20 years, working on projects ranging from cancer drug trials to less legal chemical concoctions. I laid my first LSD tabs at 19 years old in the darkroom of the photography lab at the University of Texas. It was a wild ride, those days. But I had since settled down and had made myself more than I could have hoped for in so far as my career and life. Things had been great. Come on, guys, this isn't funny. I snapped back from my thoughts on my coworkers and just realized that nobody had answered me. Strange, I thought. Surely this was some kind of joke. Maybe I had been awake too long. My brain wasn't making the connection that a pile of leaves could have blown across the parking lot. And here I am, standing here, looking like a crazy person, shouting at someone that wasn't there. I chuckled to myself and turned to my truck, climbing in it, but still not able to shake the sense that someone or something was watching me. I turned the keys to the ignition, and the roar of the engine helped drown out the nervous silence that surrounded the nearly empty parking lot. I took off, not wanting to look back in fear that I might actually see my phantom pursuer. As I drove away, the feeling intensified, and as it did, the accelerometer needle crept higher and higher as I sped home. The lock to my front door turned and the door swung open as I walked into the entryway and let out a long sigh of relief. Home. Home was a small ranch house in an outlying township of Allegheny County, the county that Pittsburgh is located in, directly southwest of the city. I could be to the various entertainment and sporting events in less than 15 minutes. On the other hand, I could escape to wild and wonderful West Virginia in about a half hour. It was a much better balance than the hot streets of San Antonio and the even hotter surrounding deserts. My ranch had 3 bedrooms, 2 full baths, a nice sit-down kitchen with an island and a smart fridge, a connected dining room and adjoining living room. With no upstairs, I slept, worked, ate, and bathed all on the same floor. I had laundry and laundry chute in the basement, as well as an additional TV and futon for guests who had maybe had one too many drinks at my place. I hadn't thrown a party yet, but now that I had begun to get to know my coworkers, I was planning on it soon. I checked the back door, which lead off my dining room, and looked into my backyard. Nothing, just a white fenced-in yard, surrounded by overgrown vines and trees in the connecting yards. Behind the fence and directly behind my house was a vacant lot, and on the other side of that woods that stretched all the way down to Washington County. So, in essence, nothing. If anything were to happen, it would have probably been traveling for miles, I thought to myself. By the time it gets here from Washington, it's just going to want to take a nap. I plopped down on the sofa in my living room, mouth half ajar as I prepared to slumber off for the night and the weekend to come. The TV turned on as I flipped the remote and turned to one of the local news channels. I had caught the story just in time, as the anchor feverishly scoured through the teleprompter. Reports have been sporadic and sketchy from various residents in the area, but one eyewitness had this to say. I gulped, thinking back to the feeling of being watched in the parking lot, as a man in a John Deere hat, with a beer belly and wife beater took frame in the camera. He began to speak to the off-screen reporter saying, "Alls I know is it was big. It had these sharp, white teeth, and when it saw you it would hiss like a rabid, wild animal. But it walked upright, you know? Like it was a man, but it definitely ain't no man. It was furry, almost like it had a full coat of a bear, or a black bear, but it definitely ain't no bear. I got my shotgun from the porch, but when I came back yonder, thing done up and had split." The reporter interjected, "Did you hear it growl or snort or anything?" "Yes'm, I suppose I did. It was hissing, but it ain't like no hiss I ain't never hear, you know. It showed dim, pearly sharp teeth done split up and vanish into thin air." The uneducated response was kind of humorous, but I wasn't really in a laughing mood at this point. "How did you know it was out here?" Obviously a pre-canned question by the reporter, as it rolled off the tongue perfectly in the next breath. "You see, that's the weird thing. I'm not sure what it was you call it, some sort of sixth sense or something, but I just felt like there was something out there. I told my wife, "Hey, wait, there's something out down yonder in the yard." My heart dropped and I changed the channel immediately. Shivers ran up and down my spine, as I knew, just knew, that I had been an experiencer of whatever this was. I debated calling into the news story and sharing my experience, but didn't want to even bother. This had been the stuff they wrote about in those kooky UFO books, or the weird Bigfoot books. Someone had just felt it. And if that didn't discredit me, I don't know what would. I'd be 58, trying to sell a copy of a book of the day I got spooked, desperately giving cryptozoological talks at conferences of weirdos and crazy people alike. I dropped that real quick and decided it was time for a movie. I flipped through the Netflix selections, still unimpressed at the streaming service. Nothing new, nothing good. Just the same old TV show selections, mostly from the 80s and 90s, and C-grade movies. Snap! I jumped up from my sofa, immediately clutching my Galaxy S5 and activating the flashlight switch. It was about 8 p.m. when the twig snapped out my dining room window, which I had opened to let the cool breeze in. A sense of dread and fear overwashed me. I should have called the damn news station and had them send a crew out. I could have got them on camera. I could have been the hero who killed whatever this thing was. Footsteps. One heavy, one softer, one heavy, one softer. They stopped. I slowly crept towards the window, keeping low, almost like you do in one of those Call of Duty video games, so as not to make any noise in my house and tip off my position. This was it, I thought to myself. I was going to do something heroic finally. I was going to be a part of something extraordinary. The footsteps started again, this time receding back towards the fence, but again they stopped only after a few steps. I heard this hiss the man had described earlier as I slowly crept up to the window. There was a switch to the spotlight to my backyard, just between the door to the patio and my window. I quickly lunged for it, not wasting a second, and light flooded the backyard. I gasped in horror as my face squared with the window. Staring straight at me were two sickly, yellow eyes with black pupils and no iris I could see. The thing was walking upright, but it was covered in a silky, brown fur. It was looking straight at me. Obviously the light was flooding it so it couldn't see too well onto my patio. I doubt it saw me. I doubt it saw me at all. It quickly hopped over the fence, and I heard the footsteps, both now heavy, padding into the darkness. I sat by my window for the remainder of the night, with the light on. I had nothing but a kitchen knife and baseball bat at my disposal, but it never came back. The sun rose, and I ventured outside to investigate the footprints. Nothing. There was nothing even out here. I walked back inside and turned on the news to get an update. Nothing? No follow-up? I checked the websites. No reports, not even a recap. Wait, what? Had this actually happened? Was this real? When was the last time I slept? I couldn't even recall anymore. I swear, there had been something out there. That's where I ended it. Now it's been a long time since this happened. But since then, I swear every night, I hear something walking around my backyard. But every time I go to look, there is nothing there. It's been happening more frequently, almost as if it's getting ready for something. I'm still suffering from insomnia, and I can't help but get the feeling now that we're approaching an important event. An important event in my life that is going to define who I am for the remainder of it. I just wish I knew what it was.